Alright, boom. Actress, musician, mom, daughter, sister, wife, fellow human Jamie Lynn Spears puts out a book. Things I Should Have Said. She must have some regrets, right? I mean, that's quite the name for a memoir. It's not your first name. It's not some nickname that you didn't address whatsoever throughout the book. It's not some motif that you address beautifully throughout the book. It's things you should have said. Why is this? Let's see what questions we can answer in this review. I'm going to summarize the book, give you guys my thoughts on each chapter, go over some standout quotes, who I recommend this book to, and what books to maybe check out next. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam, and I want to make self-growth normal, because people shouldn't have to look this information up. It should just be mainstream knowledge. If you agree, then please make sure to smash that like button. Jamie Lynn Spears' main objective with this book was to share her experiences on her own and share the events that led her to where she is. It seems like independence is really important to her. It was cathartic and healing for her to write. Chapter 1, The Business of Family. Jamie Lynn Spears was what she called like millions of other babies around the world, and oops. Her mom owned and operated a schoolhouse, and her dad was an alcoholic who did a lot of different jobs throughout the years. I didn't know that they had a brother named Brian. I also didn't know that they grew up in the South, Louisiana specifically. Chapter 2, My Rising Star and All That. Creative outlets were not big in Kentwood. As Britney's fame grew, it seems like Jamie Lynn tried to separate her career from it. Or at least, like, I don't want people to think that I'm famous because of my sister. Obviously, family was important and she loved spending time with family during tours, but it baffled her every night how continuously Britney was able to, like, captivate 30,000 people for hours at a time. A sketch comedy show called All That reached out to her after watching some backstage acting of hers during a Britney tour. All That, for anyone who doesn't know, I actually didn't know this, was basically like the kids' version of Saturday Night Live. Honestly, her dad sounded like a terrible person. Didn't really seem like she thought so, which makes sense. I mean, it's your dad, but I heard somewhere that blood might be thicker than water, but it's not thicker than common sense. Chapter 3 is Teenage Angst. At this point, I was like, okay, where are the things that she should have said? I don't get this. In this chapter is where you hear about the start of Zoe 101. I also found it interesting that she didn't find it hard to play Zoe, seeing as she and Zoe were both such similar characters. In this chapter, there still weren't really any of those things that she should have said. Am I taking the title of this book too seriously? Please let us know in the comments below. Chapter 4 is Never in the Shadows. This, for me, is where things got a little bit meh. That's my word. It's so meh that it's not even a word. After the end of Zoe 101, Britney basically became Jamie Lynn's mom, in a sense, as Britney's career continued to soar. After 2 children, Britney's behaviors were considered by Jamie Lynn to be erratic and troubling. With this guy named Sam Asghari, who, based on Jamie Lynn's description, sounded like just a plain narcissist. I was 16 and didn't understand the demons surrounding my sister. I only knew something felt off kilter, but in reality she was struggling to manage the fallout from Sam's scheming, and I'm sure that made her feel like she couldn't trust anyone. Is it really her place to speak on this, though? It makes me wonder if she went to Britney before publishing this book and said, a lot of people are gonna read this, but I want you to read it first, and let me know if anything makes you really uncomfortable for me to speak on that you'd rather keep private, or that at the time I didn't understand. If she didn't do this, it would have been smart to do it, because 1, it would avoid legal issues, as during the writing of this video, Britney and or Britney's lawyer/team has already allegedly sent her a cease and desist letter within 24 hours of the book publishing, and 2, Jamie Lynn could have been like, I spoke to Britney about this and she told me something very different from what I thought was going on. So now that I understand the situation from more than just my point of view at the time, it's easier to see clearly the consequences of XYZ. Like, the second half of this chapter sounded like line crossing after line crossing, despite her good intention. Chapter 5 is Pregnancy and Perception. You'd think that having a child of her own would make it easier to understand some of what was on Britney's plate, but I guess it was too different for her or something like that. Again, I mean, it was even impressive how she laid out the story of her pregnancy and breaking the news to her mom and the retrospection of it. Of course, social media wasn't there yet for her to just jump on and directly tell her fans. Later in the book, she even acknowledged this. Chapter 6, Breaking Up and Letting Go. When she was pregnant, the guy that she was with, Casper, he sounded kind of like Sam. And the further I got into this chapter, the more I was convinced that they should probably break up. Manipulation, disappearances, lying, belittling, gaslighting, infidelity, etc. Obviously, the book itself is more specific than this. Here, to me, at this point in the book, it started to sound like more of a things I should have done than things I should have said. Chapter 7, A Butterfly Gets Her Wings, is where she adjusted to the complexities of being a child and living like an adult after the birth of her child, Maddie, and the breakup of her and Casper. It sounds like Maddie is ultimately the biggest reason why her filmography is not that prolific. And there's nothing wrong with this either. I'd like to stress that. Motherhood, writing, and eventually singing. For anybody curious, at the moment, since 2020, Jamie Lynn Spears has starred in a romantic drama show on Netflix called Sweet Magnolias. Season 2 premieres early next month. Chapter 8, Much More Than the Right Guy. Of course, you know, the guy she's with now is the subject of this chapter. He supported her career, her motherhood, and everything, and again, it's impressive how she laid out the details. Everything from the engagement to the wedding and the dynamic of the relationship and its evolution and where it is now. Toward the end of the chapter, you get an exploration into, you know, how her music career came to be. Chapter 9, The Sacrifice of Stardom, is also where, you know, that whole meh thing I was saying earlier, it's like times 10. At first, she looked at like stops along her road to success with a more objective, here's how it works type of lens. At least more than the rest of the book, based on what she explains. But again, regarding the whole thing with Britney, it seems like Jamie Lynn did not have much of an understanding as to what was happening. And it almost seemed in this part like she didn't care that much. It's like when someone says, I'm trying, but you know they're not actually putting that much effort in. I believe Britney's experiences with people who wanted to use her tore away her ability to trust others and left her vulnerable. In the midst of all this, she had her heart broken, became a mom, and while she retained her iconic pop star status, the cracks from the early disappointments became fissures. Britney didn't reach out for help dealing with the issues she was facing. It seemed most everyone on the team was more interested in the money coming in than in getting her the help she needed. I'm assuming this, among other things, was what led to the conservatorship that was established in 2008. Okay, so the conservatorship was addressed, but what the hell? I'm assuming? Assuming? Really? Did she not know about this? Lawyers and third-party entities were taking advantage of Britney's success at the time when she was suffering from what appeared to be some emotional issues. Appeared to be? I don't know. It's almost unbelievable that she sees it like this. Still, she observed that perhaps some people are predisposed to issues brought on by the pressures of Hollywood, maybe imposing unrelenting demands on teenage performers who are in the midst of a complicated developmental period places them even more at risk. Chapter 10, The Day My World Stopped. This one I refuse to spoil. It is the best chapter. At one point I actually got goosebumps. In fact, you can actually hear her at some point tearing up in the audio version. Whatever you think of Jamie Lynn Spears, this is the one chapter that no one can be like, oh my gosh, what a lame chapter. Chapter 11, A Good Mom. Here was her description of her immersion into motherhood. Chapter 12, You Can Take the Girl Out of Louisiana. Jamie Lynn's attention to personal values toward the end of the book really seemed to tighten itself up. Above everything, she stuck to motherhood and over the years declined role after role. And again, in 2020, she picked up a role in Sweet Magnolias. Chapter 13, My Testimony. This is the chapter that Jamie Lynn says she wishes she didn't have to write. Of course, it's the chapter that maybe 90% of people checking this book out right now have been waiting for. But let me tell you one thing. If this book were not a memoir, this would literally be the only chapter. This and maybe the next one, which is called Breaking the Cycle. What she said in the last 2 chapters was missing from every other part in the book, and I don't understand why. I have to be honest, there wasn't as much of I could have done X or Y. There wasn't as much of I could have done / said X or Y instead of what I did, or looking back, this seemed like a bad idea, as I was hoping. This is a good memoir. It's not great or excellent, it's just good. I enjoyed it, but her story, despite how detailed it was, ultimately came off to me as unfinished. Some people can put out memoirs at stupid young ages and pull it off. I don't know how. Most celebrities nowadays do it in their 50s. Jamie Lynn Spears at the publishing of this book is 30 years old, and this one just seemed like it came out a decade or 2 earlier than it ideally could have. Aside from the last few chapters, I think the book admittedly doesn't do its own title any justice. Also, there's not that much of this whole family drama in the book that people are talking about in the news, but there's definitely some. It's a really small portion of the book. What I heard of it left a bad taste in my mouth, even if it was sort of squashed and drowned out toward the end. You know what would be great? A Britney Spears memoir. Quotes, "Fame doesn't dehumanize you. It actually forces you to respect and appreciate your privacy. Social media will always be a double-edged sword. It can defend and inform just like it can damage and destroy." Executives said things like healthy lifestyle, which in their world meant something completely different than it did in mine. Once you lie, you need to tell a whole bunch of other lies to cover up the first one. Direction 1. I recommend this book, simply put, for anyone who wants to know more about Jamie Lynn Spears. Direction 2. If you like this book, you may enjoy Courage to Soar by Simone Biles, Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey, or If You Ask Me by Betty White. Things I Should Have Said by Jamie Lynn Spears. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video, if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification whenever I drop new videos, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere, and I will see you then.